Hey everyone! Welcome back to Line Shape Form. Today we're diving into the essential foundation of drawing. Curved lines. Curved lines are everywhere in nature, from the shape of a leaf to the human body. They create fluidity and grace in your artwork, conveying motion and rhythm. In this two-part video, I'll show you warm-up exercises and quick practices to help you with muscle memory development, improved control, line confidence, symmetry awareness. I've already covered straight lines in previous videos, which I will link in the description box below. So let's get started and unlock the magic of curves together. But before we start, I'll quickly show you the brush I'm using for those working digitally. I'm using this pencil brush set for this tutorial. If you're using Clip Studio Paint like I am, you can find a download link in the description box below. It's available for free. But if you can, I encourage you to consider leaving a small donation to support the artist for their effort and generosity. But feel free to use any brush you like. These exercises will help you get familiar with your tools. Once I'm done with all the exercises, I'll fine-tune the brush to my preference. I'll be using the Natural Pencil 1, and it's my first time using the updated version of this brush set. What you see here are the default settings. I'm going to select a smaller brush size and do some scribbling. For these exercises, I'm going to leave the stabilization at its default setting of 0. By the end, I'll have a clearer understanding of whether I need to turn it on or not. You don't have to follow this step, but based on my quick scribbles, I'm going to change the anti-aliasing from none to weak to reduce the graininess of the lines. I also want to be able to change the brush opacity whenever needed, so I'm clicking on the wrench icon here. To open the Subtool Detail palette, in the Ink category, I'm going to enable the visibility of the opacity setting. Now you can access it directly from the Subtool palette. That's it. I'll leave the rest as is for now. Now let's practice. We'll start with these. As a warm-up, let's start with some freehand curve drills. I'll show the first set of examples at real speed, and then speed up many of the exercises in editing. I'll indicate the sped-up sections with a little icon. As mentioned, I'm not using any stabilization right now. I'll go through all the exercises without it, paying close attention to how this brush performs. There may be times when my lines are a bit wobbly, especially when drawing slow, precise lines or long strokes. However, the lines could be fine when using quick motions. There may be instances when turning on stabilization would be beneficial, and others when I prefer to leave it off. I might also find that I should keep it on at all times. These exercises will help me get used to the brush and give it a real try, while also allowing me to determine if I need to adjust any of the brush settings. Of course, you don't have to go through all the exercises every time you want to use a new brush. You can just do a few of them. Now you can repeat all of this with each line direction and angle. You can also create longer, more dynamic lines. Now I will also test whether I can draw tapered lines with this brush. I've already covered how to draw tapered lines in one of my videos about straight lines, so I won't go into it here. I can see that the lines are slightly tapered, but I'm pretty sure you'd notice it more if I were drawing traditionally. This is something to keep in mind when adjusting the settings. I believe the tapering will be more evident when drawing long strokes, which we will do later. You can repeat the whole process with the other arcs as shown here. Now let's move on and draw a bunch of pipes so we can use these to practice line layering and quick, tapered strokes to create some shading. Start by drawing a gentle, slightly curved arc. Once you have your first arc, draw several more arcs parallel to it, maintaining the same gentle curve. Now, repeat the process by drawing the same gentle arc, but curve it in the opposite direction. Once you've completed that, try drawing the arcs at various rotations. Next, let's add some flexibility to the pipe by introducing a curve. To create a sense of perspective, widen the pipe towards the front and gradually decrease the spacing between the arcs as you draw them from the front to the back. For the next pipe, let's introduce some variety in its width. Great! Next, I'll layer tapered lines over specific parts to create darker, more defined areas, adding depth to the piece. Of course, we could have added line variation to the arcs when we first drew them by applying different pressures to create darker and lighter areas within the lines. However, since we're currently focusing on layering lines, this is another technique to achieve line weight. It's also important to note that with some pens or digital brushes, creating line weight may not be possible. In those cases, you can effectively use this layering technique. To finish this, let's do some simple hatching to create additional shading by drawing slightly curved, quick, tapered lines. As mentioned in the intro, the benefits of these repeated drill exercises include developing muscle memory to train your hand for smooth, fluid motion, building steadiness to reduce wobble or stiffness for improved control, boosting confidence by encouraging you to commit to strokes rather than hesitate, and enhancing symmetry awareness by helping you notice inconsistencies in arc size or direction. I've covered layering techniques and tapered lines in more detail in my previous videos, Lines Lesson 1 to 3. If you're struggling with this, I recommend doing the exercises in those videos first. This isn't about speed, so take your time and don't get discouraged if you don't get it right immediately. If you're struggling, take a step back and focus on the curve drills first. Start by drawing rows of the same curve, then move on to layering lines, and practice drawing a lot of parallel lines with little spacing in between. First slowly, then quickly. After that, work on tapered lines. Take it one step at a time, and before you know it, you'll see improvement. If you're a traditional artist transitioning to digital drawing and don't have issues drawing lines on paper, but are struggling digitally, I personally don't see any problem with using stabilization on your brushes. I would recommend giving it a try without stabilization first and practicing for a while. However, how well you can draw without stabilization can greatly depend on the device and its drawing surface, as well as the digital pen and brush you're using. Therefore, I wouldn't consider it cheating or taking the easy route. The stabilization settings were created for a reason. If you're new to drawing in general and starting digitally right away, I recommend practicing traditionally at the same time. I believe it's easier to train hand-eye coordination the traditional way. These are all exercises you can do both traditionally and digitally. Next, we'll do the same thing using a curve that resembles the letter C. Draw a smaller C curve inside the first curve, then repeat the process. This time, leave some space between the first 3 C curves and then draw additional curves in between them. Let's draw some curved pipes again, but this time let's shape them differently than the previous ones. Feel free to make up your own shapes and have fun with it. The next curve looks like this. This time, we'll start in the middle and draw a compressed version of the curve first, then gradually stretch the curve in width as we continue towards each side. When drawing the curves on the right side, we'll also flip the curve vertically, creating an illusion of perspective. Let's have some fun and play around with the curves a little bit. And now, we move on to the S-curve. Next, let's draw longer curved lines that run parallel to each other. Next, we'll draw two parallel curved lines with a bit of space in between. Then add another curved line right in the middle of the first two, and repeat this process. Now let's do the same, but this time make sure all the curved lines converge towards a single point. We'll repeat this again, but this time the lines in the middle will have more space between them, while the lines towards the outer edges will be closer together. This will help create a bit of a 3D effect. This exercise will help you with drawing hair, but we won't go into detail right now as there will be a separate video dedicated to hair exercises. You could fill pages and pages with the exercises I'm showing you in this video, and these are just a few examples. Repetition will help you develop muscle memory and build confidence. Feel free to experiment with all sorts of shapes and ideas to keep things interesting. We'll explore shapes and forms in a separate video, so think of this series as a step-by-step tutorial to build your skills. But remember, I encourage you to actually practice these exercises instead of just watching. These exercises will also be helpful when drawing patterns or textures on objects like pipes, ropes, scales on reptiles or fish, animal horns, and armor, just to name a few examples. Alright, we're getting close to the end of this video. I'll be sharing the next sets of exercises with curves in another video, where I'll also show you how I fine-tuned this brush to fit my preferences based on my test run. So, if you're interested, keep an eye out for the second part. Keep practicing, and I hope to see you there.